Well, welcome everybody to the Shaping Destiny workshop. Thank you so much for being here. Have you guys had how is Summit going for you so far? Awesome. Are you having a good time? Is God speaking into your life and into your ministries, into your families? I hope so. We're going to have a really interesting conversation of something that is so critically important in orphan care right now, and that is the transition from institutionalization to family-based care. And we're going to talk to a very special person here in just a moment. Let him share his story, and then we're going to interview him. I am David Hennessy. I'm the Director for Global Movements for CAFO. I'm very, very pleased to be here. Joining me is Nicole Wilkie, who is our research fellow. So if any of you went to the OVC Research and Best Practices Symposium yesterday, Nicole was able to put all of that together. And way to go. And joining us is Dr. Kenneth Acha, who founded the Shaping Destiny Ministry in Cameroon. He will talk about his transition and all of that happened. Dr. Kenneth is he's a college professor. He's teaching in Austin, and I'll let him share a little bit more about what he does. But he's going to really focus on the Shaping Destiny ministry and just take a little bit of time, and then we'll have a conversation. We want this to be very conversational. So, Kenneth, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, let me clip this, and we'll get right into it. Again, my name is Kenneth Acha. I'm really, really excited, thrilled to be here. I have met many new friends already, and I've been learning a lot. It's really, really exciting. Have you guys been learning as well? I think so. Yeah, it's been awesome. Whenever I get the opportunity to just hang out with people that are passionate about serving orphans, that love the Lord and want to share that love with other people, I just get happy. I get motivated, and it's awesome to just have that kind of energy together and just learn from people who are doing this kind of work. So, like many of you, what motivates the work that we do at Shaping Destiny and what I do in my personal life is I believe that orphans deserve the highest standards of care possible. And what also motivates us is the fact that there is a movement that God is raising all over the world, that we really, as a global community, can actually raise the standards of orphan care, not just for orphan care, but for every child. We have what it takes to be able to do that on a scientific level. We have what it takes to be able to do that on a manpower level and on money level. We have what it takes. So that drives us. We also really believe that we can, as a global community, change the way we perceive orphans, and that when we start perceiving orphans the way we perceive our own biological children, then the way we treat them will start following. So these things motivate us, and I'm sure they motivate many of you, and that's why you're here seeking to be able to improve and grow to be able to serve orphans really well. So for me, my life is a story, and for all of us, our lives are stories. And I'm going to share a little bit of my own story with you as a way to then introduce us to talking about the transition, because you guys understand that everything we do is part of that story that we have. For me, my father was born in a remote village in Cameroon in Africa several decades ago, in an area where baby formulas did not exist, and my father was born a complete orphan at birth. His mom bled to death. His father had died before he was born. So for a child like that, in that day and age, born like that, if you don't have a mother, you're out of luck. And my dad came into the world like that. And not only was my dad born a complete orphan, he was named Muai. It's a name in the language that means one who is thrown away, abandoned. So he was labeled like that from day one. And he grew up with the scars of raising himself, and we grew up knowing a man who truly loved us, who loved us, but he bore those scars of being abused and of raising himself. And let me really just stop here and share a little story of how my dad's name affected us a few years ago when my wife and I, had our first baby. Our first son is Joshua. We were excited like every other parent when we knew that we were going to have a baby, any baby. And then when we found out the sex, we picked the name Joshua. We were thinking we want to give a name to our son that, that speaks of what we hope and aspire that he could become. And we wanted him to be Joshua. And then as time was coming, we realized that culturally speaking, we needed to name him also in honor of my late father. And the name that we were supposed to give him was Muwai. And that didn't really sit well for us. and we were struggling. Like, our dad really, my dad really meant a lot to me, and I wanted to honor him. But then the only way that was available to honor him was to call our son a child who's abandoned from day one. So we started consulting elders that are Christians in the culture and praying. And then we felt like just before we were supposed to fill out the birth certificate, we had a revelation from God. And we felt that God was saying through those elders and through our prayer that it's good that we're looking at the name Muwai and considering the meaning. We should also look at the name Joshua and consider the meaning, because this child is going to be called Joshua Muwai. Now, Joshua means God saves. Then the revelation was that God saves orphans was a message that we need to be reminded every time when we see our son, not that he is one who was thrown away, but a child that reminds us every morning. And this was to a young couple that had been serving orphans for 67 years. At the time, I'd resigned from my medical residency in Waco to go focus on serving orphans, and we were going through some tough times. So our son became a message that just reminded us every time that God indeed is saving orphans. And you guys are testimony of that, because you are doing that kind of work. So I grew up after my dad died when I was 9. But we sort of went through a lot of difficulties. And I'm sharing these things with you because they inform the work we do. And I couldn't go to school. I dropped out of grade school. And then I ended up in the U.S. I ended up in the U.S. in December 2000. And through a lot of miracles that we don't have time to share here since we want to move quickly, and became born again in 2000, in 2002. Then by 2005, between 2002 and 2005, I started really feeling God's call to start serving orphans, and that's where Shaping Destiny, which I'm here to talk about, was born in 2005. That was just a few months before I started medical school at Texas A&M, and then Shaping Destiny started. I started sponsoring 3 orphans with my student loans. I don't advise that, but that's what I did. I started doing that, and then my classmates started seeing what I was doing, and then they started supporting, and then we went from 3 to 11 children in the orphanage to 21 children in the orphanage, and to 41, then to 85. By the time I was done from medical school, there were 85 children in the orphanage. And then we're helping some outside the orphanage, pay tuition and things like that. And then but the problem that we faced then was the orphanage was overcrowded. There were 5 children sleeping per level of bunk bed. So on one bunk bed, there were about 10 children. So we raised money, and God was very gracious. We raised over $180,000 and built a huge facility to care for orphans. And we were hoping that this place, now there's 85 children, we're going to increase them. The capacity is 150 orphans. And the goal was build this, and then there was another plot next by, raise some more money. If God does it once, you believe you can do it second time, right? Yeah, if it gives you one, then faith grows. We're believing that the next time we're going to build another one next door, and then we'll have this one for boys, and then the other one for girls, and then there would be 300 children there just loving God and growing. And then, you know how God does things. In 2011, God intervened. At the time, we were excited. I'd resigned from residency again it was 2009 then. I was doing some seminary training to sort of grow and prepare myself for really dedicating myself to serving. And then I was praying one afternoon. We were all happy with everything we were doing. We were happy about the success. The hundreds of children had been served up to that point. And we'd even adopted some children, a couple of children to Waco. A friend of mine who was a colorectal surgeon, he's a mighty man of God. He's in Paris now training to go serve in Cameroon. So he had adopted 2 children. I just couldn't imagine that a little person like me, God will be using to do all this good work. So I was happy. We weren't thinking about any transformation, any transition at all. So I was praying one afternoon, and I felt like God basically it revealed something to me. And after I finished praying, and I went and talked to my wife, and she felt like God was actually speaking to us. And the revelation was that I needed to write down scriptures, only scriptures, and send as a letter to a local pastor who was on staff at our orphanage. And I would tell him not to interpret it or anything, just take the scriptures and go and read it to people living around the orphanage. And after he's done, he should not interpret or preach anything. He should just ask one question. Do you want to join God in serving orphans? That's all. No interpretation on my end or on his end. Just ask that question. I figured, King James would not be good for this. It's complicated. I used the Living Bible to make it really plain. And I sent that as an email. The pastor printed it. And then after 3 days of going and doing that, I called him. And I was shocked when I heard him say that he had a list of 53 families that had written down their names. Some were very emotional when they heard the scriptures. It was like they were hearing it only for the first time. And that they wanted to take in orphans and love them as their own biological children. This was a community that I had grown up in, and I did not think that the people even cared. But I thought they just sort of lived for themselves. And God was opening our eyes to seeing things very differently. And this revelation began the transition that we went through that took 2 to 3 years to go through. So we didn't do the transition because we were unhappy with what we were doing. We didn't do the transition because I felt like I'd seen some new research that it was after the transition that I actually started doing research and started looking into seeing family-based care and seeing how family-based care was the right thing for the environment that we're serving, the community that we're serving children in. And we went from 85 children in the orphanage to right now, as we speak, there are 7 children in there, and there are 7 children and 2 staff members. 2 staff. It's not an orphanage; it's like a family, and we use that as a transitional home. Like recently, I was speaking to recently, as in the day before yesterday. I was speaking to Jackie, who's the manager that works with us on the ground, and there were 2 twins that she went and discovered, and they were with a woman that we had already taken away one of the children that she had because she's not good up here, and then she goes around and she gets herself pregnant, and she was carrying the 2 children on her back and sort of saying, "Take them, please. I don't want. They give me too much trouble. Take them." Even those are the kind of children we take and bring into our center and nurse them to health, and then try to place them. So I think I'll end here. There's a lot that we did with the transition. There's a lot of complexity. For example, we needed to figure out, okay, was this legal in the first place? Now, for us to now start doing all this foster care work outside, is it even legal? Okay, we figured out that was legal now. These 53 families, well, not all of them may be good enough to be able to put a child into their home. You have to come up with a system to sort the ones that are capable from the ones that are not. Then the children, you don't just put any child with any family. You have to sort of figure out which child will be best with this family now that you know this family and know this child. We went through all of that, and the training from Austin Bible Institute was very helpful because we found that one of our greatest challenges was the staff that we had. Change is good, but people resist change. They don't like change. And we first had to help them be able to see and have this new paradigm, to be able to see that really orphan care within families is not only good, but it's what we should be doing in that environment. And the training was helpful to be able to give them that, but they had been used to taking care of orphans only within the orphanage. They needed new skill sets. Training to be able to learn how to do a new thing. And you guys know when you don't know how to do something, you're resistant even before you want to hear about it because you don't know the demand. So we had to help them, and they still continue to take the training because we feel like we need to keep pushing for higher standards of care. Now, I will stop here and give you opportunity for the rest of the time to ask questions. And
All three of us are sharing one lavalier mic. We'll get to questions in just in a little bit. Before we ask you a few questions, I just want to see who is in the room. How many of you here? I'm looking around. I don't see any Cameroonians here. So, how many of you here are actively working in orphanage ministries around the world? Okay. All right. And that's through, how many of you are in churches that are supporting orphan care efforts internationally? Okay. How many of you are missionaries serving overseas? Got a few of those. Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Any other categories you're interested in? I just wanted to get a gauge of where we are.
I do. When you ask the questions, if there were any Africans here, and I was going to joke and say I have my 2 adopted daughters here with me, and Danielle and Stephanie. I work with them, and they've been with us for close to 2 years now. I see them as my sisters, and I joke with them and say I've adopted them. So when you asked that, I felt like introducing them. Yes.
Well, about a month or so ago, Nicole and Kenneth and I had a great conversation, and what we want to do right now is really just kind of repeat that conversation just in front of you. I think it would be really, really valuable for you to hear what we said and what we learned. Because some of the things that you said, Kenneth, really, I mean, they amaze me. You had a definition for what a true orphanage is. Can you share that with everyone? What's a true orphanage?
Absolutely. I would love to. Now, I'm going to share the definition. And before I do that, I just want to make clear that the focus that I have on, which is something I'm excited to have been hearing through some of the workshops I attended earlier and from Jed's discussion, is the focus that we have is on high standards of orphan care, and that's what we shoot for. Whatever form that happens to take, it is less important than the fact that it is high standards of care for that child in that context where the child actually is. That is what we focus on. And I get many students through Austin Bible Institute that want to go start orphanages. And I teach a class, and we sort of go through helping them first start thinking well about what an orphanage is and what alternative care for orphans outside an orphanage is. And I have a definition that I give them. And I tell them that a true orphanage is a small, and every word in the definition matters. A true orphanage is a small, functional family unit. That a true orphanage is a small, functional family unit that is involved in helping children that do not have a parent, and it does that in 3 ways. It does that by providing healthy, enduring, and cross-generational family relationships. Every word has a meaning, and I'll break it down. You hear many times people talk about a family environment. When we used to have 85 children in the orphanage at Shaping Destiny, and we're looking to have 150 in the same building, we were very proud that we provided a family environment. But orphans need a family, not a family environment. Now, the family could look different. Okay, I'm not saying that the family, there's 2 ways you define a family. You could define a family with a functional definition of a family. That's actually what a family does. Or you could define a family with a structural definition of a family, which is a blood or bond relationship, which bond involves marriage or adoption, legal bond. Adoption is a legal bond. Marriage is a legal bond. So generally we talk about we talk about family when we think about the nuclear family and mom, dad, children, and then you start putting extended family, grandma and uncles and all that. That's a structural family. That's good. But there's also another family which is also very biblical, which is a functional family. In this family, the person who comes and really is committed to you for a lifetime and loves you and is there and acts like a mom. In this kind of family, a grandmother can be a mother, even though the grandmother is not adopted in a legal way. If the grandmother functions and does everything a mother should do to you, then it's a mother. In that definition, there's a proverb in my culture that says there's only one mother and there's only one father, which is to say that it doesn't matter who gave birth to you, the person who treats you as a mother is your mother. This is a functional definition. So the definition talks about a small, and the reason small is there is because I also see situations where people say, okay, we're going to have a group that has a ratio that is good, maybe staff to child ratio of 1 to 7, and then we could have maybe 20 children, and we raise them up, and then they're grown and leave, and then we fill the house. I say that is good, but you need to understand that family, you don't see family, children grow up, and then they have another house full, and then they focus on those ones. What family does, I still rely on encouragement from my mom today. I know if you have a mom alive, or if you're a mom, your mom is there. If you're a woman and you're having your first baby, your mom is one of the people that is holding your hands and saying, push. Your mom is one of the people that's going to teach you how to breastfeed, who is going to be there. Your dad will teach you how to raise your own son if you're young. So to be really providing family to these children, you don't need to adopt them all. If you could still, you could be there and have what may seem to be an orphanage if you keep it in a way that you sacrifice to raise a small group of people and become grandmother. Be there to be grandmother. Be there to be grandfather. And many institutions, whether they're small or large, lack that element which is very important in actually helping people cross-generationally. To be 18 and leave an orphanage doesn't mean that you are done with learning and growing in life. And it's extremely difficult to be able to be such that you graduate and fill the house, to have the time to focus on the ones that have left and be a mom and dad to them and be grandma and grandpa. You have a situation where you have orphans that become old and leave the orphanage, and they're still orphans then, and they remain like that. They're detached from any family association. So that's what my definition basically takes into consideration, that it is better to be involved and really dedicate oneself to a small group, maybe right. A couple, yeah.
So Kenneth, we also had talked about, you learned a lot. You learned several key things from your experience. And one of the things that you said, one of the strategies that you really learned was raise the standards of child care for all the children. Can you tell us, just a couple of minutes, tell us, what do you mean by that?
Absolutely. David, you see, it's easy to live from here. I've been here for nearly 15 years now, and I'm an American by naturalization. It's easy for me to live and go to a different country like Africa, or us live and go. And we find an orphanage that is in the community, and we want to really just pour our heart on it and change. The thing is that institutions are the product of the society in which you find them. You cannot detach an African orphanage from what really happens in the society. Okay, you cannot do that. If you focus on helping raise the standards of all children, you get to be able to help work with local governments and other institutions to be able to raise standards, because there are situations where you go, where I've seen people who go and they look at abuse within orphanage, when an orphanage manager spanks an orphan to correct them, and then a sensitive person might see that as abuse. If you go to the local school or to the local police station, I actually had a situation once. The person went to go report, a manager went to the police station, and the police were whipping the prisoners, and there was they were shouting with cords. Well, the idea is to change, is to focus on the society, and that's the first thing. And the second thing that this definition, this view does, is that it stops these wars that we have between people that are very passionate about family-based care, like I am, who say then close every orphanage. If we focus on high standards of care, there are few situations, but there are situations where having a group of children taken care of in what we might call an orphanage today would be the right thing for a certain amount of time. But then looking at things like this avoids that, and we've heard discussions here that we see the importance of that, where we help to educate one another with what God has taught us, but we're very humble to make sure that we don't feel like what we're saying is always right.
So it's key to raise the standards of childcare across all the children. You also said that you grow by multiplying leaders. Explain that a little bit.
Yeah. Now the next thing is, hey, how many people here who are involved in ministry don't want to see the ministry grow? Send your hand up if you don't want to see it grow. You don't want to see it grow. Now, how many of you want to see your ministry grow? Send your hand up. I do want to say. Now, the thing is that if you are in orphan care like I was, remember I told you earlier how we went from 3, 11, 21, 41, 85. The only way I knew how to grow was to increase the size of the orphanage. What if I had a better way to grow? What if I had a different paradigm of growing where I don't harm the children in the process? Wouldn't that be awesome? That's exactly what we're focused on doing right now. What we do right now is, with this definition of orphanage that I gave earlier, Stephanie and Danielle the first came to me. Danielle came to Austin from Oklahoma. She was wanting to go to train at Austin Bible Institute and then go to South Africa and start an orphanage. She doesn't want to do that anymore. But I didn't tell her not to. She just learned too much to do that. Stephanie also wanted to do that. She doesn't want to do that anymore. Now, what I advocate right now to do is that instead of me having 85 children in an orphanage, what if I select other local people, Stephanie and Danielle them, who are local and international, who really have a passion for orphans? What if I select them and train them and show them everything I have learned and be like a spiritual brother to them and just pour in my heart to send them and say and warn them and say, make sure that you serve only as many children as you can really commit to your lifetime, but teach another person. Wouldn't I be growing? I would, right? I would be growing and really helping other people. And isn't that how Jesus taught us to multiply disciples? Is you disciple one and then the disciples the next. Did Jesus tell us to start a mega thing that would? No. In fact, we see in the New Testament that when the church there, after Jesus gave them the command to go into all the world, when they tried to build their own mega church after the Pentecost, well, God unleashed persecution that scattered them. I think it's important to you can grow. I feel very excited now when a student comes. We have Amber that we left, who is in Austin now. She's training to go out. When she goes out, I will empty my wallet. I see her as a sister. I would give her anything I have and tell her, please go serve, but make sure that you serve well and care about quality. That is growth for me. I don't have to have large numbers if I can multiply leaders. So I encourage people to multiply leaders.
Please.
I was just going to ask a couple of questions about that.
Please.
As you're talking about leadership and multiplying leaders, how are you ensuring quality with training? I know in our conversation we've talked about your transition process from residential care to family-based care. There's a lot of organizations out there that are considering maybe making a similar transition. I know one of the things that you talked about was the need to have that quality control to make sure that people have the adequate training, that families are adequately assessed and trained. How are you ensuring that both in your own organization and then as you train leaders?
Okay, let me make sure I understand the question. Is you're asking not that how are we training the people, but how are we ensuring that the training is actually being effective on the field? Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
So how are you ensuring that families that are being trained there, that it's having the effect that you want it to have?
Okay. What we do basically, we've developed forms and criteria to be able to go. We do home visits and things like that. We get to know the child and study the child, and we match. Now, from the time we started doing these studies, the ratio of people who actually stay, we don't have a scientific study, but when you look at it, the number of children who actually stay, because when you match a child before, when we first started, when you match a child, some ran away. Some didn't want to stay with the foster parent. But the more you train the foster parent and the child, then you start having more stay together without splitting, without the child wanting to run. In fact, we had some foster parents who were coming excited to care for orphans. They were like, God is moving my heart. And then a month later, they say, come take this child away. I don't want to see this child ever. We don't have that anymore with the training, because some of the children, they have layers upon layers of trauma that they come with issues. If you don't train the family, they will, because, as we know in the States, not every person who goes to church has the same level of maturity. There's some that are more mature than others, and when we match children, there's no way to select only the Mother Teresa's and match children with. It's hard to do that. You match children with Christians that are mature to a certain level, but if many of them, if they don't have the skills necessary to be able to care for the child, then they feel like it's over their head, and they say, come take and give somebody else who can. So that's reduced with training. And we continue to train our staff. And for us, it also is a continuing process of learning and becoming more effective, which is one of the reasons we're excited to come to Cape Food this year and have Stephanie and Danielle who work with us learn, and I myself learn. I attended a workshop earlier that I was like, wow, the research is awesome. I love it. Yeah. So it's basically that. I hope I...
Yes, and another couple of questions with that. One would be, when you're talking about training up leaders, how are you ensuring that those leaders understand what they need to about orphan care to be effective? There's a lot of people that have a lot of good intentions. How are you communicating the best practices that they need to know, especially to those leaders who might be more local?
Okay. So what we have been doing, I like to write on the board a lot, so if I do, please. So what we have been doing is when we wanted to, earlier on, like 4 or 5 years ago, way before we started the transition, I did research, because one of the things I was doing at the time is I was taking young people from here and going on mission trips, and I was also working with local young people who wanted to go into orphan care. And one of the things I kept seeing was these people are so full of passion and love for God, but they're very ignorant with how to do the real orphan care work. So I started searching to try to find some kind of program. I would have sworn that there had to be some school that was doing something. And then after searching and searching, we didn't see anything. That's where Austin Bible Institute was born. First, it was called Missionary Mandate, and then the name changed to Austin Bible Institute. And what we do is we have up to 3 years of training in orphan care, and we go through several courses. It's 96 credit hours of college-level work broken down into courses, and there's a 4th year, and you get a bachelor's of biblical and theological studies by taking a few other courses. But what Stephanie and them are doing, Stephanie and them are in their 2nd year now, Stephanie and Danielle are in their 2nd year. What they do is they take course after course that focuses on a different aspect, and we've sort of identified different competencies. We've identified up to 12 different competencies, and I'll write a blog post about that soon. So if we have a blog that we put stuff on called orphancaremovement.org, Orphan Care Movement. If you can subscribe to that, I will send Orphan Care Movement Now, so we have identified 12 competencies ranging from prayer to spiritual formation to actual skills and leadership competencies that we've identified that if you have those competencies, you'll be able to work in different areas of orphan care and be and do well. So,
are you teaching people that are in developing nations as
yes,
well?
absolutely. We have a campus in Bamenda in Cameroon, and last summer I was there. And with the internet right now, we have students from different countries. We had a student who's just finishing Clifton, who is running an orphanage in India, but he's taking classes through ABI online. So when I went to Bamenda, because many of the people don't have internet access, so we actually, for the last 2 years, I've had a 3-month and 2-month training of people right there on the ground, how to do some of these things. And the plan that we have is to set up a small hub there with computers, maybe 2 or 3, 4 computers, where people can actually be able to take classes online by doing that, which will be very inexpensive. And
so are you doing that just with Shaping Destiny staff right now, or are you reaching out into others?
We're in Cameroon and through AustinBibleInstitute.com, anybody can register to take classes. Anybody.
Can I ask you something a little bit about the training that you're
Yes,
giving staff?
absolutely.
I remember you saying something about how one of the biggest challenges was to... Sorry. I remember you saying something along the lines of one of the biggest challenges was to transition the staff in the process. So a lot of organizations, when they're transitioning from residential care to family-based care, are really concerned. We love our staff. What would we do with our staff? We don't want them to be out of a job. So you want to transition them. And I remember you saying that there were a lot of challenges about getting them on board. Mm-hmm. So in addition to your training components, which are so exciting and so interesting and so needed, what other ways did you facilitate the staff getting on board with transitioning to family-based care, and how have you supported them throughout that?
Okay, thank you for the question. Now, what I would suggest if you want to do this is that it starts with leadership, with you, the leader, first. It starts with you, the leader, not the people that if you're one of the key persons, it starts with you, right? It starts with you. Now, people, even if you listen to people who do advertisements, commercials, they say people hear something like 7, 8, 9, 10 times before it even registers. It should be something that you don't like one day announce that we are switching today to now doing family-based care. It's a gradual process where I encourage, for example, with us, before the change, there was a time, and I didn't even know that I was preparing for that. Before the change, there was a period that I and the team we fasted for 21 days and prayed for God for a vision for our organization. After that, it took like 6 months to develop a good vision for Shaping Destiny about what we felt like God wanted the organization to do. Now, when you develop a vision like that you start casting the vision gradually. Don't make the change abrupt. Like other people need to hear God. They need to start getting these ideas, and then they need to be allowed to be able to see that, yes, indeed. You don't want the people that are following you or leading your organization to be people that you drag like a horse and then they go anywhere you want. God wants to speak to them too. So if you make the process gradual and they start catching that same passion and vision that you caught, at some point you didn't have what you have at this. Like for me, at some point I was orphanage-based care is what we're doing. Then I switched. Well, it took me a while to switch. They need some time to be able to switch. So doing it gradually like that and having them develop a new paradigm is good. And teaching helps. Teaching, like our churches are able to transform us and we grow as Christians because of good Bible teaching. Good Bible teaching is what changes us, right? When you start teaching your people good practices of orphan care and what works and what doesn't work, and give them some time, maybe a few months. You start focusing on high standards of orphan care. And you could guarantee that your people at least loved orphans before they were working for you. If they didn't, then that's a problem. And if they're humble people, they want to know the truth, and they will want to do the truth that glorifies God. So if you give enough time, but you can't substitute training. People need to be taught to really change.
So Kenneth, you're talking about leading the leaders. You're talking about modeling that for them, having them multiply it there. I want to focus back on the families really quickly. Nicole and I we're talking, and we're discussing best practices. How are you assessing those families? What kind of indicators are you looking at to determine, is this being successful, and are these children being cared for appropriately?
Okay, what Shaping Destiny does is that when we switched into fostering now, which is how we call it locally, we don't tell a local family that you're fostering because they don't know what that means. Is that the child now is your child, you love them like your own child, but our local staff visits every month. They have a monthly visit. We visit the schools to see how the children are doing. It's a thing that is shared care. So there was something about staff losing their job. In fact, you need more staff if you want to be more effective with the transition than you did when you didn't. So there wouldn't be a risk that your staff would lose their jobs. It'll be that you have to train them to do things differently, to do different, and because your staff should be people who are passionate about orphans to start with. That's awesome. It's hard to motivate a person, but if a person is motivated rightly, you could teach them anything they want to know. So if the motivation is there, and then you give them time, so that they don't feel like you're dictating, but they feel like, wow, God is sort of taking the scales out of my eyes, and now I could see how the heck were we doing this kind of care before? Now it should have been this one, and they themselves become the people that preach to you, the leader. Like we need to keep doing that. So I think when you do that,
So you're visiting the families, and then you're visiting the schools. What are the things that you're actually taking down? What are you monitoring to ensure the success of the program?
When we put children into the families, there's something that we all have that sometimes I feel like, and I don't say it to anyone, sometimes I feel like I am a better parent than most people. You never say it to anyone else. And so and a lot of people feel this way. Like, and I don't want to go there because it would take so much time. But so what we were doing was we wanted to watch and make sure these children we loved with all our lives were being taken care of well. So we don't have any criteria. What we try to see is the children, many of them know us. How are you doing? Ask the teacher, how's the child doing? Is the child participating in class well? If a child is not doing well, a teacher who's observant will pick up on the fact that the child is not interacting with other children well, or participating in class, or doing their homework well. We talk to the child, and the children trust our local staff. They understand that they're advocates for them, that if something is not well, they should tell them. So between that, we provide medical care for the children. Many of our local families don't have the resources to provide medical care, so we provide medical care, and we offer to pay tuition to families that want to. And because one of the reasons that I feel like many of the local families weren't caring for children wasn't because they were bad, it was because the money to pay tuition and to pay medical bills is significant. And you don't want to bring a child into your house, and then your own child is sick tomorrow, you struggle and go to the hospital, and then that one is sick and you can't. They say, you are showing partiality. You'd rather not even involve. And we all will feel almost like that if you couldn't do that. So when you offer to do that, and you offer to pay tuition, then they could share their food and share many other things. And that to us, for the children in the orphanage, 80% or so of the cost was going for food and the staff. When you put them in a family, that takes care of the food and the staff, and you can care for more children. So it's not more expensive, it's less expensive to do that.
So Kenneth, If I may. So it sounds like with the families, you're monitoring the family relationships, you're ensuring that the parents are parenting, you're ensuring that they're going to school and monitoring their status in the school. Those are awesome indicators. We have a few minutes left, and I do want to leave some time for questions, but I want to circle back to one thing. Given the audience that we've got here, you said something that really connects with me and connects with just who I am and who CAFO is at the core, and that is don't lead, serve local leadership. What would you say to this group of leaders here and this group of advocates to explain that? Just take a couple of minutes and share your heart on that, please.
Awesome. I thank you for bringing that up. Now, how many of you here would like that if God called you home tomorrow, the work you're doing in developing nations will continue strong and even grow without you? How many of you would like to see that? Okay, very good. I would love to see that. Now, the way to do that is not for you to lead, to provide the leadership. It's for you to be a catalyst. And boy, that's one of the most difficult things you'll have to do. It is difficult to know how to do something better and then wait and let somebody else grow making mistakes. Sometimes, for me, it's just that I think I could do better, even though it's not true. But thinking that I could do better is just the same as knowing how to do better, because, your reality is your perception, right? When you perceive something a particular way. So I think that's so crucial. And there's story after story after story of us living from the U.S. or Europe and going and starting some project, and then when we come back home or something happens, we get old or die, or like we all die. The thing just dies too. You have to be able to, and all over Africa and many developing countries, there are good leaders. Sometimes you have to be patient, like Jesus, to actually develop your leaders from fishermen and develop them from people who are nothing people. If you want to be able to work like a microwave, not a crock pot, which is really how you should work if you want to do that, then you would sort of say, gee, they're too slow. I'm just going to do it. And then you do it, and then they watch and follow you. And they get used to the fact that you are the leader. And, I mean, why even think when you can think for them? Yeah.
Sorry, brother. I had to take that down. That is what I learned today. Lead like a crock pot and not a microwave. I love that. I love that. So I'm sure that you have some questions about shaping destiny, about the transition. What kind of questions do you have for Kenneth?
Can you tell us, are you training, tell us how you train families? Are you training them monthly? Are they coming in for training? The families that are the adopted families?
So the question was...
Do you have any curriculums for that you'd be willing to share? And then also in your assessment of the family, your monthly assessment, do you have forms?
So the question is, how do you train the families? How often do you train them? And do you have assessment? Do you have curriculum and assessment materials that you're willing to share?
Yeah, the training is done initially. Okay, for that let me make sure I make this very clear. Shaping Destiny still grows and invests in the transition to make it better in terms of, everything you do in ministry is limited at some point by funding and capacity. Whether it's all your ministries will be limited at some point like that. Even if you are Bill Gates, at some point it would go. So we also have run into that one of the things we want to see happen is to see a situation where families are trained not just once in the beginning and trained in a way that is not very... I would love to have a curriculum which our staff at Austin Bible Institute can design the curriculum. We've done it before. We can design it is the resources to be able to then make it in a way that families can invest in taking that. We haven't done that yet. What we do right now is just coach, guide them in an informal way initially. Yeah, but if there's anything you can do, and which Austin Bible Institute would be glad to help, and we want to do at Shaping Destiny, is to have a situation where it's not just an initial training. That's not enough. That's good. It's important. It's necessary. But it's not enough. But to continue to do that, you need staff and you need funding to be able to do that. And for us, yeah, that's something that we quite haven't gotten there.
So it sounds like you have a desire to develop that, to be able to share, but you don't have that quite yet.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
When you initially had those 53 families that responded, that wanted to take in orphans, you said some of them were suitable, some weren't. How did you evaluate the ones that were and weren't suitable to take in children?
So the question is, of those 53 families that initially responded, how did you evaluate which ones were suitable for caring for orphans, which ones weren't?
For that, we do have forms. And for that one, we do have forms. And the basic thing is, and this, which is something that we've espoused at Shaping Destiny from the beginning, orphans are to be treated as our own biological children. If I couldn't give you my child, forget it. And that's the same test we offer for adoptive families. If I wouldn't really be okay with my child ending up with you in that circumstance, in that community, then you're out. So but there are forms and questions that people ask, but the whole thing could be summarized, and the questions are geared towards one: do they have room in the house? Could they provide food? We narrowed down to close to 20 families from the 53 at the initial stage, because there are some people who don't even have food to feed their own children, but they have a big heart. And then we would weed them out for that stage. And there are some people who don't have a bed or any place for the child to be able to sleep. And there are some people who have bad character. Just if you interview people in the village and interview local pastors, they would say they have anger problems and they have this kind of problem. And then you don't want to take a child that has trauma, who's likely to be more naughty than the usual child, and give to a person like that. So we have forms for that, but the whole thing is geared towards interviewing, being a good interviewer, and trying to discern really with the weaknesses that this child has and the weaknesses this person has. Can the two work together, and what would the result be? And yeah, that's.
Thank you. And understanding that this is in a culture without a formal fostering system within the country, so you're creating things from scratch.
I wanted to say something real quickly, that most of our foster families can't read and write. So when you develop education for them, it's a thing that you have to think about many of those things. Sorry.
Yeah, we had one question over here first. Yes, sir.
I want to come back to your point. You said earlier about it will take someone maybe 7 to 8 times of hearing something before they can really catch that vision and transition. And so if someone doesn't have the type of special revelation you had, of a set of 5 scriptures and an insightful question, does the conversation, what's that first conversation look like if you're involved with a large institutional ministry? You say, hey, I went to a workshop with Dr. Acha, and he said we should consider this. I mean, how do you have that first conversation to begin that process to say, maybe this isn't the only model?
So the question is, as these, I'm going to reframe it, as these leaders that are in here are working with people who are leading institutions around the world, how do they begin that conversation to share that vision? What's the initial conversation look like?
I would say don't have the conversation just like that. That's not advisable. That the thing to do instead is to take some time and study the environment. Take some time also and focus, be the person who is going to introduce the person and the organization to develop a passion for the highest standards of orphan care. If you try, and I've seen this in my classes, the students who have already started an orphanage before they come to our classes are the most difficult to help. Because it's their baby. Their whole emotions are wrapped around that. You question that baby, you've just destroyed their whole self-image. You can't do that. Like, they wouldn't listen. If you push just what is best for the children, don't even mention that the orphanage is anything you even think is bad. If you keep pushing that, one thing you can guarantee, nobody starts an orphanage who doesn't love children. I've never seen that. The people who have orphanages today who will die to defend them love children. They do. The only problem is that they've chosen a paradigm and have fallen in love with it, and they're married and have wedded to that in a way that to divorce is a very difficult thing. And so the only way is to slow process of helping them really see that it may not be in the best interest of the children. For us, real quickly, the first group of people we put into our four-star program weren't our 85 children in the orphanage. Even after the revelation, we started by saying, these children have been with us for a while, and they've suffered a lot from living from where they were, and they've learned this new community. Let's test the waters and do a few with other people who are suffering, so that if we take you from really bad to a foster family, and we sort of do that for 6 months, and then we start transitioning the orphanage. We were not doing that in disobedience of God's revelation, but even with God's revelation, we took some time to sort of say we weren't using them as necessarily as just guinea pigs. We knew that if you are really hungry, suffering, and they give you a good family, you're less likely to not want the family compared to if you fell in love with all the children at the orphanage and they give you to this family and there's no child in that house. You would retaliate because you can't play with somebody else. And that becomes problems. So taking it slow and pushing them in an area they already care about. They certainly care about the welfare of orphans if they have an orphanage. They do. And if you talk about what they want to talk about and they care about, then they're more likely to be reached. Yeah, if you let them know that you think their orphanage is a problem by even suggesting, it's harder to win them. A brother that is offended is harder to win. That's a proverb, right? Like, there's a proverb that says an offended brother is harder to win than a city or something like that. There's a proverb like that. So don't offend.
And I would like to also add an answer to your question. And I'm really don't mean this as anything self-serving for CAFO. It's really as for the movement itself. I really would encourage you, if you're supporting leaders and working with institutions that are all around the world, invite them to CAFO next year. Invite them to come and let them know there's a gathering of experts from around the world that are coming together to talk about doing exactly what you do and doing it to the best of their ability. And come, let me pay for you to come. Use your resources to do that. Get them here, become friends, develop that relationship, and introduce them to people who are doing just amazing things for the Lord. We have dozens of countries that are represented on this campus right now, and there were over 100 leaders from 27 nations that met the 2 days before here that are talking about creating these movements within their own countries. They're actually doing it. Churches are rising all around the world to care for orphans in families. I know that there's a lot more questions, and we really are out of time. I just want to finish up one comment. Yeah.
Yes. So for those of you who are having similar questions, or maybe your own organization is transitioning, we, as CAFO, did just release a document. It's profiling 6 case studies of transitions to family-based care. 6 different organizations who have actually made this transition and can talk a little bit about some of those pieces like assessment and follow-up, and I'm blanking on some of them right now, but just what does the training component look like? How do you bring stakeholders along, and how do you start those conversations? So if that's something you're interested, just write your email up here. I'll take a picture with it, and I can send it out to you.
And there's one strategy that was not specifically discussed here that we're just going to demonstrate right now. Prayer. Prayer is the number one thing that you can do. Pray for your partners. Pray for the people who are leading these institutions. And Kenneth, I'm going to ask, would you please pray over all the people that are here, and pray over the partners that they have all around the world, and for God to serve through them?
It would be my honor to do that. Can we pray? Do you mind if I kneel down? Okay. Father, we thank you that you have a group of people, an army that you're raising all over the world. I thank you, Father, that you have not forgotten the orphan, but that you remember the orphan. I thank you for what CAFO is doing. I thank you for the people, all these people you've brought from different states, from different countries. Oh, Lord, I pray that you will pour your Holy Spirit on them and give them the wisdom and discernment to be able to work in some of the most difficult areas that they work, oh, Lord. I pray that you would just rain down, oh, Lord, an anointing on them. I pray, Father, that you would empower them, oh, Lord, not to be discouraged, not to quit, but to continue, oh, Lord, that when new information is revealed to them, that they will be open and humble and teachable to be able to learn, but that they will not become discouraged because of the many failures that they've made, but that they will trust that you are able to work through them to redeem even with the mistakes. I pray for their partners, oh Lord, who love you and love children, but may be leading children in ways that are hurtful to children and to them, oh Lord. I pray, Father, that you would touch them and open their hearts to be able to see in a new way. I pray, Father, that when we talk to other people who are brothers who passionately love the Lord and are loving orphans but are serving in other ways, that we will be humble and careful in the way we communicate and not to show ourselves as though we are better, but that we are fellow sinners saved by God and just seeking to serve Him. Father, bless the work of CAFO and bless everybody in here, O Lord. Use us to glorify yourself in the name of Jesus. Amen.